John Evans spent his life protecting the wild heart of America. 40 years he served as a park ranger in the mighty Rockies, but nothing in those decades prepared him for this moment. He plunged into a deadly, freezing river to save the life of a single grizzly cub, the last of its rare lineage. Could this desperate act of faith be enough to earn the respect of the cub's mother, a powerful matriarch? Our story begins in the crisp, brutal air of an early April morning. John was checking the perimeter. He was on the opposite bank of the granite cliff, a towering sheer wall of rock and loose soil. Then it happened. Not a roar, but a sickening, enormous crack. A massive cornice of frozen snow and unstable earth, right at the cliff's edge, gave way. The matriarch grizzly, the regal mother of a critical, rare genetic line, was too close. And right there beside her were her two cubs, the future of that lineage. There was no time for the mother to react, no time for the tiny cubs to even understand. Two small, vulnerable bodies tumbled down the near vertical slope. They rolled and slid, claws scraping desperately against loose rock and frozen dirt. It was agonizing to watch. Two small splashes marked their landing. The cubs landed on a narrow, precarious gravel bar, nothing more than a strip of rock trapped between the cliff and the rushing water. The older cub scrambled up, terrified, its whole body trembling uncontrollably. But the younger cub was struggling, already halfway submerged in the water's edge. The icy river, a torrent fed by spring melt, was the first killer. Its temperature, hovering just above freezing, promised hypothermia within minutes. Suddenly, Matriarch's roar split the air. It was a sound of profound animal grief. She was trapped above, thrashing hopelessly at the cliff's unstable edge. And then, the second, more personal threat arrived. A massive, solitary shape appeared downriver. It was a boar, a huge male grizzly, known for his dominance and his brutal tendency to kill any cubs not his own. The boar, drawn by the sound of distress, began moving toward the helpless cubs. Don't look away now. John Evans is 60 years old and 80 yards away. Can he find a way to save these two tiny lives from an alpha killer in the deadliest river in the Rockies? John frantically fumbled for his radio. Nothing, just static. The signal was dead in this canyon. He felt a deep, cold panic, the feeling of being utterly useless. He knew the value of these cubs. They were the genetic gold of the Rockies, transported from hundreds of miles away to restore the diversity of the line. Their survival was bigger than just two little bears. It was about legacy. John searched the cliff face with his binoculars. He saw a narrow vertical fissure, a jagged line of weakness in the granite, just possibly wide enough for a tiny paw hold. He began screaming, waving his arms wildly, pointing a desperate finger at the crack. The older cub heard him. It turned its head, its amber eyes fixed on the distant human. Confusion mixed with fear. The boar was closing in, its immense shadow already reaching the gravel bar. The matriarch above unleashed a series of sharp, commanding calls, a primal communication only the cub could understand. The older cub finally understood John's frantic pointing. It was the only way out. The cub began the ascent. This climb was an absolute nightmare. With every paw hold, the loose rock crumbled. The dust was thick. It was a constant battle against gravity, instability, and fear. The little creature pulled itself higher, its breath coming in gasps. Then a terrifying slip. One paw hold broke. The cub fell a few inches, left dangling by its front claws, scratching desperately with its rear legs against the impossible smoothness of the granite. John let out a hoarse cry, completely useless from his side of the water. The cub hung there for a heartbeat that seemed to last forever. Its hind legs searched, found a minute ledge, and it clung on. It continued to climb. Up a foot, slide back 6 inches. Up another foot, hold fast. Its small paws were shaking violently. Suddenly, the boar was right there, its massive head peering over the gravel bar. It grunted a deep, menacing sound. With one final, adrenaline-fueled tug, the little cub's front paws grasped the very edge of the cliff. It rolled over, collapsing onto the safety of the wide ledge. The matriarch rushed forward, frantically nuzzling and licking her exhausted child. You've just seen one miracle. But don't look away yet. The younger, weaker cub is still trapped, and the boar is now standing guard. The most selfless act of John Evans' life is about to happen. The older cub was safe, but its sibling was still below. It was noticeably smaller, clearly weaker, and utterly paralyzed by the ordeal. It lay there, panting pitifully. John yelled and pointed again. The little cub tried to move, but the boar was now fully aware. It turned its enormous, shaggy body and stood directly in front of the cliff face, blocking the path to the precious crack. The younger cub was now caught between two deadly things: the chilling threat of the icy river at its back and the enraged alpha male in front. The matriarch's roars from above were no longer commands. They were shrieks of profound, heart-wrenching helplessness and despair. John felt the crushing weight of failure. He had nothing left to throw, no plan B. John looked at the tiny cub, utterly defeated on the gravel bar. He saw the boar's massive silhouette. He knew with absolute certainty that if he hesitated for even a moment longer, that cub would be dead. The rocky mountain line would be gone. He made a split-second decision, a decision that defied decades of wilderness training. He ripped off his heavy coat. He kicked off his boots. John Evans, a man over 60 with a lifetime of hard work etched into his face, looked up at the cold blue sky. He closed his eyes briefly, just a beat, and uttered a raw, desperate prayer. Not this one, Lord. Not this lineage. They need this one. Not here. Not today. His eyes snapped open. The decision was final. He ran to the water's edge and leaped. It was an act of pure, distilled madness, jumping into a deadly, frigid current to face a fully grown, enraged grizzly. The shock of the water was immediate and agonizing. It was like being stabbed with 1,000 icy needles all at once. The cold pierced his skin, hit his bones, and squeezed his heart. John gasped, sucking in a lungful of air, but the cold was already making his muscles seize. Hypothermia was setting in instantly. The current grabbed him, trying to pull him downstream toward the rapids. He fought with every ounce of strength, powering his arms against the relentless flow. His arms began to burn, but the cold was a dull, constant ache. The boar noticed the movement. Its immense head snapped toward the disturbance. It saw the human. It let out a deafening, throaty roar, a sound of confusion and deep menace. John was now squeezed between the two most formidable forces in the Rockies: the icy fury of the river and the killing rage of the grizzly. Suddenly, a massive surge of water slammed John into a submerged, unseen granite rock. He felt a sharp, blinding jolt of pain shoot through his side, a cracked rib, maybe worse. He swallowed a mouthful of frigid water. He was instantly disoriented and dizzy from the cold and the fresh injury. He struggled to keep his head above water, his vision tunneling. He pressed on, fueled only by sheer, stubborn willpower. At that exact moment, the gravel bar crumbled slightly. The little cub, weakened by fear and cold, slipped and fell into the freezing water. It began to flounder, choking and splashing. The boar, startled by the movement and the easier prey, turned its massive head toward the struggling cub. John didn't hesitate. He took a huge gulp of air and dove. He opened his eyes into the blurry, murky green haze of the river. He saw a small, pathetic figure sinking downward. The cub was already losing consciousness. John lunged forward, his hand stretched out. He managed to grasp the cub firmly by the scruff of its neck. The cub, in a final, terrified reflex, dug its tiny, needle-sharp claws deep into John's shoulder. It was a sharp, searing pain, but John didn't loosen his grip. He kicked off the bottom with all his might, pushing toward the surface. He broke the water, sucking air into his burning lungs. The cub wheezed and coughed. John turned his head. The nightmare was right there. The boar grizzly was barely 15 feet away. Its mouth was slightly open, showing terrifying teeth, its eyes fixed on them. Its massive body was already gliding through the shallows. There was no going back across the river. The nearest drop-off was just to the left. John paddled furiously with his one free arm. His injured side screamed in protest. Every stroke was a fresh bolt of pain. One stroke, two, three. His toes finally scraped the bottom. The boar was closing the distance with alarming speed. With a final, desperate surge of adrenaline, John heaved the cub onto the gravel bar, collapsing and rolling out of the water right behind it. The water exploded right where his feet had been a second ago. The boar's immense jaws snapped shut on nothing but air and water. It did not dare crawl fully onto the shallow gravel, but it stood its ground, blocking any immediate escape. John was hurt, soaked, and freezing, but the cub was safe, huddled beside him. You need to see this ending. John is safe from the water, but still trapped with a grizzly boar ready to attack. The most dangerous climb is still ahead. You won't believe the moment that follows. John stood up, the icy wind immediately chilling his soaked clothes. Every muscle in his body was shaking uncontrollably. He looked at the narrow crack. It was their only way up. Holding the little cub tightly against his chest, its claws still digging into his shirt, John began to climb. He had to find purchase with one hand, clinging to the rock face, while securing the precious cargo with the other. The matriarch and the older cub were peering over the edge. Halfway up, his tired, numb foot slipped. John was left dangling again, suspended only by one hand. The pain from his injured side was a blinding, all-consuming fire. The cub whimpered in fear, tightening its grip. He dangled there, scraping his boot against the rock, searching for a purchase. The seconds dragged into an eternity. His fingers, numb and white, were losing their grip. Finally, his foot found a tiny ledge. He pulled himself up. Just a little further. His lungs were burning. His muscles had failed. Only pure, sheer force of will remained. The edge was agonizingly close. The matriarch was leaning over, her massive head low, watching. Her deep, guttural sound was now a continuous, encouraging rumble. John reached with his trembling hand. He grabbed a twisted root jutting from the topsoil. One final, monumental tug. He pushed the cub up and over the edge. The cub tumbled onto solid ground. The matriarch instantly snatched it up gently, carrying it away from the terrifying drop. John pulled himself over the edge and collapsed onto the cold, hard earth, utterly spent. He lay there gasping, shaking, and safe. Then the final, incredible moment. The boar, which had been watching below, climbed onto the ledge and approached John. Its immense mane swayed in the wind. Its eyes, chips of dark ice, stared directly into John's. It could have attacked. It could have ended the life of this frail human who had interfered. But the matriarch stepped forward, placing herself slightly between the boar and John. She looked at John, then at the male. The boar simply stood there for a few seconds longer. It let out a single, deep, low snort, not a threat, but a sound of recognition. It turned and walked away. The matriarch approached John, her deep brown eyes seeming to hold 1,000 secrets. She gave a quick, almost imperceptible nudge to his shoulder, a gentle push of acceptance, and then joined her cubs. John eventually got up, his body aching, his shoulder stinging, his spirit soaring. He watched them go. The Grizzly family, the vital, rare Rocky Mountain line, moved slowly away from the cliff. The matriarch led, the two cubs trotting side by side, bumping each other playfully. They were safe. The legacy was secured. And John Evans, the retired park ranger, had paid a heavy price in pain and fear. But he had received the highest reward, the silent, profound respect of the wild. It was a victory for the human spirit and a victory for hope. This story is about the resilience of life and the incredible power of compassion. If this brave act has inspired you, please tell us in the comments, what is the most selfless act of bravery you have ever witnessed? We love hearing your stories of hope and humanity. And for more deeply emotional stories from the heart of the wild, be sure to subscribe to our channel.